Hey, yeah, alone again. Um, yeah, be on the lookout for these two. They are MIA right now for this show. So if you find them, bring them back. But this show must go on. So, you know me, Anne from Unexplained Realms, also a co host here at Cocktails and Crime. Today's case is going to be fun. Definitely one that was the inspiration for a horror movie. And we're going to dedicate this one to my fellow horror lover, Nikki herself. It is her birthday. Wish her happy birthday, guys. Go on over to Cocktails and Crime on our social media and send her a lovely message. Anyway, we are going to talk about one of her favorite places, which is the Old Tavern. They are closed Monday this weekend for President's Day, so head over there. In the meantime, got lots of fun stuff going on over there. You might even actually catch Nikki by the bar. Our drink of the night is a black cherry whiskey sour. I'm going to have that right here on the screen for you, and we will post it on all the socials. It is a nice, tasty whiskey drink that absolutely love. Love a whiskey sour, but add the black cherry to it. It's even better. So, moving on to the case. I don't know about you, but I love camping in the warm weather. I think it's safe to say all of us here at Cocktails and Crime enjoy camping. Um, but one of my favorite things to do while camping is sit around the campfire and chat about old urban legends, scary stories. One particular story actually stood out to me and it made me want to research the origins. That story was the call came from inside the house. Not only in my research did I discover a movie was made based on this old urban legend, but it was actually based on a true story, a true crime story. If you remember this urban legend, it's the babysitter and the man upstairs. It's been traced as far back as the 1960s, and the story always varies depending on who's telling it and what country you might be in. But the story loosely goes something like this. A teenage girl is babysitting a few children at night. The children have been put to bed upstairs, and the babysitter is downstairs. The babysitter's chilling on the couch watching TV. The phone rings, and the caller tells her, "Check the children." The teen dismisses this call as a prank and goes back to watching television. The anonymous caller calls back multiple times, and eventually the babysitter calls the police, who state they will trace the next call. After the stranger calls again, the police return her call, advising her to leave the house immediately. She leaves the home, and the police meet her outside. They explain that the calls were coming from inside the house, and that the unidentified prowler was calling her after he'd killed the children upstairs. So if you remember that tale, it's about to get even more terrifying. It's loosely based on the true-life crime, the murder of Janett Christman. Janett was born March 21st, 1936 to Charles and Lula Mae Christman. Janett was the oldest of her two sisters. She loved to play the piano and sing in the choir and was very involved with church. She was in the 8th grade at Jefferson Junior High. Janett was just a few days from her 14th birthday and was very mature. On March 18th, 1950, 13-year-old Janett Christman was asked to babysit for Ed and Ann Romack in Columbia, Missouri. It was the same town she lived in. Though it was raining and extremely cold out, the couple wanted to enjoy a night out playing cards with friends. Janett accepted. She was really eager to save money. Janett's father dropped her off at Romack's around 7:30 p.m. that night. The temperature had dropped into the 20s. Ann Romack explained that their children were already asleep, so she should be quiet. Due to their home being in a really rural location, Ed Romack taught Janett how to load, unload, and fire his shotgun. He kept it right near the door. The couple explained that she should not open the door to anyone she did not know and turn the porch light on so she could be sure who might be at the door if they knocked. Ann Romack called home to check in on Janett and her son Gregory, but there was no answer. Ann assumed Janett had fallen asleep, but the local police department received a phone call around 10 p.m. The call came from a young woman. She was screaming into the phone, particularly yelling for help. Her last words to the police were, "Come quick," before the phone line went dead. In the 1950s, technology was just not advanced, and police departments didn't really have the capability of tracking phone calls or even their locations. The police could only hope and wait for the young woman to call again. The Romacks returned home around 1 a.m. They noticed the porch light was on and they'd left it off, instructing Janett to only turn it on if someone knocked on the door. They also noticed a sawhorse against one of the outside windows. Once at the front door, they realized the door was unlocked, and once inside, they found Janett's lifeless body. She was laying in her own blood with a severe head injury and puncture wounds to her face. Her legs had been spread apart and skirt pulled up. There were scratches on her face, arms, and the cord from an electric iron was wrapped around her neck. Just a few feet from her body was the phone, and it was off the hook, lying on the floor. This must have occurred while she called the police. Ann Romack checked on her son, who was safe, and Ed called the police. But because the Romack's home was outside of the Columbia Police Department's jurisdiction, the Boone County Sheriff was brought in. These two police departments refused to work together on this investigation. The scene of the crime was horrific. It appeared Janett had fought for her life. She had several defensive wounds. Blood was smeared through the kitchen and the living room. Dogs were brought back to trace any scent and fingerprints that were taken. Once the autopsy had been performed, it was determined that Janett had been strangled and sexually assaulted. During the investigation, one law enforcement agency found a side window that had been broken out with a garden hoe, and the sawhorse was sitting right outside that window. Though the Romack family stated that the garden hoe was kept inside the home, the perpetrator wouldn't have been able to use it if it was inside the home. The other agency believed that Janett must have known the perpetrator as the porch light was on and the door was unlocked. And the shotgun next to the front door was untouched. It's likely she knew who killed her. Why would she open the door? With no suspects and weeks of questioning family and friends, authorities had no other way of knowing who murdered Janett. Though some believed it was connected to a murder that occurred in a similar fashion 4 years prior. Mary Lou Jenkins was murdered in her own home in 1946, which was a mile from where Janett was murdered. Mary Lou was 20 years old and was killed in the same manner as Janett. She was raped, strangled with an extension cord, and found in a pool of her own blood. Anxious to solve this case or blame someone, police believed Floyd Cochran was the suspect because he had shot his wife in the shoulder and the neck with a 12-gauge shotgun and then attempted suicide, but was not successful. Police interrogated Floyd for 2 whole days without a lawyer. Floyd was a black man, and word had traveled fast that he was Mary Lou's murderer. Angry mobs formed outside the police station ready to lynch Floyd, obviously a black man in the 1950s who supposedly killed a white girl. The only connection, though, that Floyd actually had to Mary Lou was that he was a garbage man that serviced her neighborhood. He had no other connection to her. Floyd confessed, but then later recanted his confession and stated he was scared of the mobs and the police and just wanted it to end. It's important to note that Floyd had significant mental challenges, so severe that he was rejected from the draft in World War II. Floyd was put on trial for the murder of his wife and also stood trial for the murder of Mary Lou. He was put to death on September 26, 1947. There were others listed as possible suspects, but only one really stood out to me. Obviously, I don't believe Floyd killed Mary Lou. But Robert Mueller, he'd been friends with Ed Romack since high school. In 1950, Robert lived in Colombia with his wife and worked as a tailor. He was 27 years old and had Janett babysit for him a few times. Though the real connection here is that Robert also knew Mary Lou Jenkins from high school. Anne Romack stated that Robert often made sexual comments about Janett's body and told Ed Romack that he had fantasies of defiling young virgins. The day before Janett's murder, Robert assisted Anne Romack in hemming a dress as he was a tailor. He assisted her in her sewing room where her iron was kept. Anne remembered that Robert actually tried to grope her breast that day and she was extremely uncomfortable. Remember, Janett was strangled with a cord of that same iron. A stranger may not have known exactly where the iron was kept to be able to retrieve it and use it to strangle his victim. It's also noted that Robert carried a mechanical pencil in the front pocket of his jacket. He often used it as a tailor. This might explain the strange puncture wounds Janett had on her body. The morning Janett was murdered, Robert called Janett and asked her to babysit for him, but she was already committed to the Romack family. She told them they were going to a friend's house to play cards. Robert also attended that card game, but he left around 10 p.m. for about an hour. He stated he needed to tend to a sick child at home. But detectives determined he had never gone home to his wife and child during that time. The morning after Janett's murder, Robert called Ed and asked if he needed help cleaning up the crime scene. This was odd, as the news of the horrific scene had not been disclosed to the public yet. Based on some of this, police used circumstantial evidence as a way of questioning Robert Mueller. A warrant was never obtained, but they questioned him overnight without a lawyer. Robert passed a lie detector test, and even though the mechanical pencil he had was consistent with the wounds on Janett's body, a grand jury just felt there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. Robert Mueller went on to sue for defamation and violation of his civil rights, asking for more than $300,000. He did lose that lawsuit. Robert was never charged with Janett's murder, and authorities refused to believe they convicted the wrong man in the murder of Mary Lou Jenkins. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think the evidence proves Robert might have been the murderer in both cases. I don't know, but it's a horrible story. It did actually inspire several movies. The first one, 1979's When a Stranger Calls, and then the 2006 remake. You can find that on YouTube. What do you think? Leave your comments in the show notes, in the social media comment boxes. Who killed Janett Christman? For now, I leave you to enjoy your cocktail while I go dig up some more true crime and find my co-hosts. Bye.